The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. The true task of humanity is not contemplation, but action that transforms the material conditions of life. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people, not because it comforts, but because it numbs. History is nothing but the continuous transformation of human nature through the struggle between those who hold power and those who are denied it. The ruling ideas of every age have always been the ideas of the ruling class. They shape culture, morality, truth, and common sense to justify their own dominance. The worker becomes poorer the more wealth he produces. As the productivity of labor grows, the value of the worker diminishes, turning him into a mere appendage of the machine. Workers do not merely sell their labor, they are compelled to sell their very time, their strength, their life itself, in order to survive under capitalism. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles, oppressor versus oppressed, in unending conflict that shapes every structure of civilization. When a worker's labor creates more value than he receives in wages, the capitalist accumulates profit, while the worker accumulates misery. No social order disappears before all the productive forces for which there is room in it have been developed, and new superior relations never replace older ones until the material conditions for their existence have matured. Capital is dead labor that, vampire-like, lives only by sucking living labor. The more it lives, the more the worker is drained. In bourgeois society, the past dominates the present. In a communist society, the present shapes the future with freedom rather than dependence. Freedom becomes real only when humans are liberated from economic chains. To speak of freedom without addressing material inequality is to speak in illusions. The workers have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. And that world begins when they discover their collective power. Machines do not free the worker. They enslave him further, multiplying production while diminishing the humanity of those. The state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the bourgeoisie. It protects wealth, not workers. The most radical reform is useless if the economic foundations of society remain untouched. Only revolution can bring true change. Class consciousness develops when workers recognize that their suffering is not personal misfortune, but a universal condition imposed by the system. To be radical is to grasp things by the root, and the root of human existence is the struggle for life, shaped by labor. When labor begins to question why it is poor, while its masters grow rich, the old order begins to tremble. Capitalism creates its own gravediggers. As exploitation grows, so too grows the awareness and unity of the oppressed. The accumulation of wealth at one pole is simultaneously the accumulation of misery, toil, ignorance, and degradation at the other. The worker produces the palace, but dwells in a slum. He weaves silk, but wears rags. He shapes the world, but owns nothing within it. Alienation divides a worker from the product of his labor, from the act of production, from his own nature, and from other human beings. When society is divided into classes, morality becomes the weapon of the powerful, a justification for exploitation disguised as virtue. Capitalism thrives on crises. Each crisis exposes the contradictions upon which the system stands. The emancipation of the working class must be achieved by the workers themselves. No savior from above will deliver liberation. Every revolution has been born not from ideas alone, but from the unbearable material conditions imposed on the masses. Labor is the source of all value, yet those who labor are rewarded least, while those who own capital take the fruits. The more one produces for the market, the more one becomes a stranger to one's own creation, trapped in a cycle of endless competition. Communism is not a dream of the distant future. It is the movement that seeks to abolish the current state of things. Property in its present form does not free humanity. It enslaves humanity to the domination of wealth. The weapon of criticism cannot replace the criticism of weapons. Material force must be overthrown by material force. Where exploitation exists, rebellion is inevitable. The oppressed do not remain silent forever. Men make their own history, but they do not make it under circumstances chosen by themselves. They act under inherited conditions shaped by struggle. The first step in revolution is to awaken the consciousness of the worker, so he may see the world not as it is told to him, but as it truly is. Wage labor is disguised slavery. Freedom ends the moment survival depends on submission. Every bourgeois society drapes itself in the language of liberty, while denying liberation to those who toil. The more civilized capitalism becomes, the more refined its forms of exploitation grow. The production of too many useful things creates too many useless people in the eyes of the ruling class. Society moves forward when the masses learn to question the inevitability of the old order. Capitalism promises prosperity, yet builds its wealth on the backs of millions who remain in perpetual poverty. Justice cannot flourish in a society built on inequality. Justice begins where exploitation ends. When the worker demands dignity instead of survival, the system is threatened. A revolution is not a single act. It is the ongoing process of dismantling old structures and building new ones. Those in power fear the unity of the oppressed more than any weapon. The oppressed learn quickly that their suffering is not natural. It is engineered. True freedom is not the freedom to starve. It is the freedom to live without exploitation. When economic systems fail to meet human needs, humans will rise to overturn them. The future belongs not to the owners of wealth, but to the creators of wealth, the workers. Capitalism destroys its own conditions of existence, creating inequalities so vast they become impossible to sustain. The ideas that dominate a society are shaped by those who control its material production, its factories, its media, its institutions. Revolutions begin in the mind long before they erupt in the streets. A society that values profit over people will inevitably sacrifice humanity for capital. The worker becomes a commodity under capitalism, valued not for who he is, but for what he can produce. Nothing seems more natural than the existing system, until the people learn to see its chains. Capitalism gives the illusion of choice while controlling the conditions under which choices can be made. In a system built on inequality, stability is temporary, and conflict is permanent. The ruling class builds systems that appear eternal, but history teaches that no order lasts forever. Human progress is measured not by wealth, but by the dignity and freedom of the many. Communism begins where exploitation ends, where humanity is no longer divided into masters and servants, rich and poor, rulers and ruled.